welcome to the Please Forward This Thanks podcast.
Let's go.
We are here, and our heart is to just share some things that have changed our lives. It's like so formal, you know. But hi.
Hi.
We are here. We are here.
That's the real start right there.
Coming to you live from Paris. We're here
So wild.
with a dear friend and girl boss and just absolute legend. You know, a part of the family, but not, lineage. Like, what am I saying?
Not of origin, but by choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have the incredible, the wonderful Lindie Northup in the building.
Dude.
Hi. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Here we are, Thursday morning. I think I'm really thrown off by your furry mic.
I know. Honestly, it's going to
It's a
take
vibe.
us a second to get used to like handing it back and forth, but I'm here for it and I feel like super cool with
Courtney
this.
loves the vibe that the fur brings.
I do visually feel like it makes sense with my aesthetic.
Very nice.
It's the mic
It's
with
almost
the
like a
fur.
Don't pet it. It's
You
that
don't
does
have to
affect
feed it.
sound.
You don't have
It's
to
quite
feed
large.
it.
It's like a whole object. But anyways, feeling good.
Yeah, does this feel yes.
Yes.
We're
Okay.
talking about that mic this whole
Okay.
podcast.
But obviously, like Grant said, you are such a dear friend of ours, and we just adore you and love you, and you are just a deep well of knowledge. But since the people listening to this don't know you, share a little bit about yourself, like what you're about, what makes your soul like come alive, like just a little like
That's
2
good.
to 5 minute thing of like we all know you're amazing.
I love a little intro.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Lindie Northup. Courtney and I have known each other for years from Oklahoma, which is funny because neither of us really relate to Oklahoma on a lot of levels, but it
We
is
love
our,
you, Oklahomans.
yes,
We
my
love
family's
you.
still there. Actually, I love so many people in Oklahoma. It has been a great place for my life, but I'm okay. I don't live there. But anyways, we've known each other for years. I just moved to LA, your old whereabouts, and I feel like for me in life, I mean, I know we're talking about this today, but what I feel super passionate about is just people knowing who they are. Knowing who they are, I always have the strong belief that, God is real and we come like He has created us. And I feel like that's something that I'm super passionate about and again, I know we're talking about this, but I am passionate about it, is people just knowing who they are in the Lord and also seeing God rightly. I feel very passionate about that. I think life can happen and it can be very easy to be not understand His nature because of your circumstances.
Yeah.
When the reality is the nature and the character of God is very good and it's very consistent, and I could talk for hours, but that's something I'm super passionate about, is people being able to delineate that amidst life, which is sometimes very up and down.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, so today we're going to dive into all things identity. What is kind of your perspective on identity? Grew up in Oklahoma,
Yep.
been in California for years. Now you're in LA. Still California, But that's like, from an identity standpoint too, just culturally speaking, those are very different
Very different.
parts of the country.
Yep.
What is kind of your finger on the pulse of identity? How do those places differ? What is kind of your perspective on identity differences?
It's such a loaded question. I love it. Thursday morning, loaded question.
Yeah.
I think that the areas of the country to what you're saying, are super different. In Oklahoma, and this again is my experience and my view, but it is, which I love, there are bits of it, both have a plus and minus. Oklahoma is more in the Bible Belt, so everyone I grew up around was in church, and that was very normal.
Right.
And then in adulthood, most of those people have deconstructed and walked away and are so pissed off at the church, and of course there's so many exceptions to that. There's so many lovely people that genuinely love God and genuinely have good. I love the aspect of the Midwest South that is about family and is about warmth and invitation of home, and I love all those things. I think the coast it's just different. It's I would say, as someone who walks with God, I feel the people that I am close with on the coast who are walking with God are really walking with God because it's more of a choice out there. And again, this is so general. There's so many exceptions, and this is my experience. But I do think on the coast, there's a lot of, it's not the popular way, not that it necessarily is in the Midwest anymore either, but I feel it's more drastic where I don't feel the norm. And yet, obviously, I have found myself around other believers personally, but I think just the culture on the coast is more progressive and is more, and it's not all bad. Honestly, it's healthier, lifestyle. I do love that. Healthier food. Let's just go there. More things to do. So like on so many practical, to be honest, on the lifestyle, it's so lovely. That's why I still live there. But it's as far as a spiritual temperature, that's a whole different conversation. It's become very interesting, and I won't open that whole can at the moment, but I do think our culture is veering an interesting way with that. So, those are just some thoughts I have top of my head.
Great.
So real.
Great. How has California influenced identity, and how has that changed your life specifically? Have you, what have you navigated maybe throughout your 20s, and now you're entering your 30s, and, it's just switching locations. How has that personally impacted your life? What are your thoughts around that?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
This may not go the angle you think it will because it is from California, but I'll talk about my experience. So I actually, for anyone listening, I moved to California actually to go to a ministry school initially, which is not California. You think of all the things in LA, but and I was more up north in the state. And so actually that season for me, I moved when I was 30. And I was at a time in my life where, for me, the 20s were rocky. I'm like, God bless anyone in the 20s. I feel for you. And actually, I feel really passionate about covering people in the 20s now more as someone who's been through that, because it's a hard time. I think it's a time in your life. I've so laughed about this with friends, but I was that fresh girl out of college. You're like, I'm going to get my dream job. I'm going to get married. I got all my things. And then I feel the 20s, at least for me, you leave college and you just run off a cliff and fall hard. And everyone's trying to get their first job. For me, I had just so many random jobs. You're just not going direction you think you are in life. And at least, again, this is my experience. It's your first round of fails in life. It's your first experiences of successes. You have no history to even compare it to. And then I had a lot of relational trauma just through different circumstances in my 20s that was really hard. And so honestly, I exited my 20s glad that they were done. And very I really wrestled with God on the back end and was listen, what in the world? If this is what life is, I'm not sure what I think about it, to be completely honest. And I was that girl who grew up just so full of faith and, kind of googly eyes to the world and, I'm going to change the world. The world's my oyster.
Still so real.
But I can totally say this with humor of and then you fall flat on your face and then trauma happens and you're I have other thoughts that might not be appropriate to say on this podcast, but there's life can be a wrestle, and everyone experiences totally different stuff. My story is just mine. And so I say all that context just to say I was desperate for healing at the back end of my 20s. And I was desperate for some sign of hope again, where I just knew that there was I could have a good vision looking forward and hope for life, just to be transparent. And so for me, when I moved at 30, to California from the Midwest, I moved out to the ministry school. And so my California quote experience was it's not like I moved straight to LA and was trying to find myself amidst that culture. I moved actually to a kind of cocooned environment. Yeah. And for me, that's why I feel I don't have the average California experience. But that choice in life has changed my life, and I'm grateful for it. It allowed me to just walk through really deep healing. And so in the context of identity is what I'm getting at. It allowed me to personally have a ton of healing. It allowed me to just just to be honest, strip away so much of the trauma that I had experienced in life, and to be able, grab my mic, might be a little rub there.
Shout out to Mike.
Yeah, shout out to my mic. It allowed me to, how do I say this? Honestly, just sometimes you just need. This sounds weird, but like in life, I'm going to say the analogy of taking a shower, but you just need to let. I know, not where you thought, but you need. It's this image of like just getting washed by water and being like, I need all this crap to just wash away, and I actually need to recalibrate what I think about the Lord. I know you're thinking about the shower. The Lord, I need to recalibrate like my heart. I need to become tender again because I was feeling bitter towards a lot of things, and to be honest, had right reason, but I'm like, who wants to stay that way in your soul? Like, that's miserable. It's the most miserable for you, and so for me, to be honest, that chapter was so important. I was there for 4 years in a little town called Redding, California, up north, but it was so integral for me to heal. And for me, I have a strong belief and now feel really centered and grounded in this of, okay, no, I've done some wrestling, and I really do stand on the rock that God is good. I stand on the rock that He's a father. Yeah, I stand on the rock that He is my friend. I stand on the rock that He is a provider. I'm still wrestling with that one, but I'm stand on the rock that He is with me. Like, those were my really big takeaways. And it's allowed me to at least separate the reality that, yes, life happens. It says in the Bible, you'll experience trials and tribulations. Like, even it doesn't matter what you believe in life, like we're all going to experience hard stuff. And I'm grateful that I have the belief that God is with me in that, and that's why we were kind of laughing about this the other day in the kitchen, Courtney, of like, what do people who don't walk with God do? Life's hard enough being real. And I'm grateful that I have a father with me. I'm grateful that I have a friend, and, context for listeners, I'm single. So it's not like I've had this partner to, bounce these things off. Like, single people can relate to this. I'm in my 30s single. So you're very much an adult in your own person, but there is this feeling of aloneness sometimes. And that's where I'm like, I'm grateful for God, because that has been the only reason that I've had, that's allowed me to like work through that, and maneuver through like those feelings of being alone, which I think every human relates to. Probably married people relate to, at some point. Like, it's just, it's the wrestle of life, Yeah. So at this point, I'm unsure of how much of your question I actually answered, but I still think we're going the direction we need to go.
The answer is cheese. Cheese.
Oh yeah, that TikTok.
I can't. Okay. So context for those of you listening, coming out of such a beautiful moment that Grant really wanted to mention cheese. I actually had a friend send me this video of a man who was like, hey, I have a solve for, depression, and I have a solve for,
he's like, don't take antidepressants.
Yeah, don't take antidepressants. He was like, let me tell you what the solve is for this. And I'm like, I'm at the edge of my seat. I'm like, tell me the solve.
What's this life wisdom?
For me, I'm like, there's Jesus, yes, but like, I'm
also
all
chocolate.
Definitely.
That's a good one. That's a sequel.
Chocolate and some red wine, and I am like,
wine and chocolate aren't the worst other things.
No. Yeah. And his response was, it's cheese, like a cheese platter, cheese fondue, cheeseburger.
Yeah, he had a point, to be honest.
I mean, he's not wrong. Yeah. But as someone who has a dairy allergy, it feels like
I'm allergic
Get behind
to joy.
Me, Satan.
It just feels as though my depression would have a few more issues for me. But no, on a real note, taking it back to what you were saying, I mean, listen, our 20s scientifically have been proven to be the time, especially for women, where we change the most. And I think in those seasons where there is, especially if you encounter trauma, especially if you don't have a relationship with the Lord, I think it's so easy for us to become shaped by the world as opposed to shaped by a father. Because when we're not running after him, when we don't know who God is, we don't know who Jesus is, or we just don't want to because we're deconstructing because it feels too painful, because life feels too hard. I feel like it could so often, our identity can get lost in that at that point, because you have the wrong voices speaking into your life.
Yeah.
And I think, at least you and I, as you were talking about Oklahoma, like we have seen a lot of people deconstruct in faith, because you grew up with a religion as opposed to relationship. And those are two
100%.
very different things. And I left the church as well. Like, you know that for several years. And I didn't believe in God. And I was like, if this who he is, I want no part of that.
Out.
Yeah, I'm like, hard no. And the Lord brought me back in such a real and beautiful and relational way that left me like on my knees and crying out to him and getting to know who he was through his word, and not through what a preacher was saying on a stage or through what Christians were telling me it had to look like. But through who he really was. I know it's hard to talk about this. I think we are called to love. We are not called to judge. You know, it's really that simple. But the Bible is very clear on that subject. And when identity is shaped by the world and not by the Lord, and you're deconstructing, you don't know where you stand, you don't know who you are, you have this trauma, it's really easy to run to the wrong things. And so, yeah, that's just my thoughts in that space. And I'm like, and living in California, you see so much of that. And relationally, I know I have a lot of friends in the industry that I come from, you know, obviously come from a background in fashion, who run from who they're created to be into the arms of a waiting sinful world, because we come out of the womb into sin, but God didn't create us that way, and we're shaped by the world. And so my heart, I think, I'm processing through this out loud in real time, because I think for me, I'm like, ugh, my heart grieves for what happens when our identity is not shaped based off of the creator who created us.
Sure.
And it's based off of what the world is saying it should look like. We should not be afraid to stand for what we believe in. We should not be afraid to feel that our identity needs to be what the world says it should be, or what that should look like. As a Christian too. As a Christian, as a, you know, as a non-Christian, all of those different things. So I don't know. I really resonate with that, and I think it's a little tricky in that space.
I think the more I've grown in life, I've realized that pain can be a driver of things, and I do think that's where the human soul, and I can empathize to this. Again, I've been through some really painful stuff, that just some horrible things, and I'm like, it's an interesting driver that can lead to really weird places if you don't. I think how you choose to heal can look very different across the board. And I think once I've had the revelation of like, oh, we're all human beings and we're all in pain, have pain we're working through. And like, you know, whether it's someone that's hurt me or whether it's like just people I care about, that I'm like, I don't really love the direction your life is going, or whatever it is, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've grown softer in my compassion towards that. I've realized for myself, like, wherever I actually have compassion, that's when I'm looking through the eyes of Jesus.
It's so good.
Where he is compassionate, and he says in the Bible, I'm not good at referencing verses, somewhere.
Yeah.
It says that he was moved with compassion.
Yeah.
And
So
I know I am a believer. And so I know anywhere, and there are totally areas, I'm always a work in progress, but I know when I'm not looking at a scenario of someone else's life, of my own life, of XYZ situations that come my way, if I don't see it through the lens of compassion, I have some room to grow.
Yeah.
And that's when I, in my own self and in my own space with God, am asking, like, Holy Spirit, help me see this person, for example. And I'm just not thinking of anyone in particular, but just John Doe. Help me see.
Hey, John.
Hey, John. Struggling with you, John. I need the eyes of God for John Doe. No, but it's like, but truly, when someone hurts you or whatever, it's help me see this person or this situation in the way that you see this person or this situation, God. That prayer alone is something I've tried to adopt, and it's something that has changed my, and it's always, sometimes things are supernatural and they're very fast, like, yay, now I see this person differently. Yeah. Most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's a progressive, daily dying, dying to my own pride, dying to my own XYZ, and we were talking about this the other day. Like I when you're wired with justice, like you and I are, there can be this need to feel right, or almost a pride in like being right. I'm totally wired like that. But I'm like, gosh, that's not the point in life. If I am wanting to become more like Jesus, I actually need to take the road of humility. And what does that look like in all the things around me? And I'm getting off topic, but I think this is all important stuff. On the topic of identity, that is appropriate to this, all goes together. Yeah. Because it's like, yes, I have concerns with our world's temperature of how people are like coming to conclusions about who they are, how they're coming to conclusions about identity. A lot of it's very feelings based, and that makes me nervous. You know, I don't know what I think about that or think I agree. However, there's a level that's not the point. Yeah. Because human beings, I heard a pastor say once, she said she used to pastor tons of people. And we had coffee one time, and I was just asking her questions about stuff. And she said, one of my biggest regrets about being a pastor is during that season, it was many seasons, but she's like, I became more focused on the behavior modification versus the like emotional pain that was going on underneath. She's like, because the reality is when people actually have, and this goes for all of us, when you have a revelation of God's love and you're belonging in God, it changes everything. And then in time, out of that place of like, settling, a lot of times your behavior does change because you desire different things and you do whatever. But the more as people, and this goes for ourselves, are trying to just change behavior and that be the goal, that's actually religious. And that's so offensive to me. It's so offensive to all the things. And I feel the fear of God in that, where I'm like, okay,
it's so good.
Holy Spirit, help me to just see people better and help me to navigate the world with your eyes, because I do think when we catch those waves, we maneuver through the world differently, and we maneuver through our relationships differently. And then I'm actually not as triggered with all the things around me, with people choosing XYZ.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's not the point. It doesn't matter that I don't agree with their choices. It doesn't like that actually just falls to the wayside. And it's like, gosh, do you know that you're accepted and loved? That same question goes to me. And it goes to, and sometimes I won't, this is a can, but sometimes it's an area of your life. You know what I mean? That needs healing. Let's just say, I don't have a good example versus all parts, you know, and sometimes it's this area of your life is not thriving. This area of your life is thriving, you know, so we're always this work in progress of stuff, but I don't know. Those are just some thoughts I have.
So good.
It's so good.
Yeah. Ooh. Man.
I'm here for that.
Here's the interesting thing I find about identity is that everyone's on a search of asking the question, why? Yeah. You know, it's the first question that we ask when we're children. Why this? Why that? Why? And it seems that like as the years go on, we're still asking that question, why? You know, or who are we? Why do I care about who I am? Why is it so important to be on this journey of discovering who I might be? You know, and identity seems to kind of be a subjective thing in today's culture. And I don't know. I think I don't have like a complete thought.
We're both processing.
Yeah, we're both kind of just processing out loud.
Real-time processing, which is such a beautiful
Which is fine, which is great.
Yeah.
But there's kind of a division. You know, I think of the scripture where Jesus is like, don't think I've come to bring peace. I've come to draw, I've come with a sword, right? And he's drawing a line. He's making a boundary line. And I think when you come to Christ, something that I think myself included in my journey at many points have struggled with wrestling with identity and being accountable. So maybe we can kind of shift the conversation into a direction of, okay, if we're working within the boundary, how does someone find their identity in God? You know, say that someone out there, someone's listening, they're like, yes, I agree. There is something morally off. There is something strange going on in today's climate.
It's like an amoeba that just keeps growing.
And I don't know where I fit in this equation.
Sure.
I don't know how to find my voice in this. You know, like, how would you encourage somebody who's on a quest of not only discovering who they are, But how would you encourage someone to really have a proper worldview of identity? What are some things that come to mind when you're trying to encourage somebody?
Yeah, I would say instead of proper, more of like a healthy worldview in that space. Yeah.
That's such a good question. I'd love to know your thoughts as well, but the first thing that's coming to mind is I do think that, and I've been there, this happens, I think people can become easily distracted in their lives and I'm going to use the word squirrely, but can get kind of squirrely with how they're making decisions and like grabbing to things, because the reality is their soul is not at rest. And is not settled. And I had a mentor tell me once, he said, Lindie, and I was processing something that was painful at the time, and he said, yeah, but the more that you become settled in yourself, and he was talking in God, of course, and you become at home in yourself with Jesus, those things won't bother you anymore. And I remember I felt a little offended at the time, like, oh, come on, I'm secure. And then it's like, nah, the reality is anytime you're not secure, anytime you're triggered by something, it's a place of pain that needs healing. But
that's good.
But to your question, I do think that the reason I bring up distraction is because I think if you don't know, if you're not even aware that you are of how you're making choices, why you're making them, etc., you will become very lost in your external everything. Relationships, maybe your job, you're not in the job you love. Maybe your job, you're in your dream job. Maybe you are really wanting to become a mother. Maybe you are a mother. All the things. And it's very easy as human beings, and we could probably all relate to this, to find identity in our external things. I've had seasons where I've been in jobs that I really was not stoked about. And, they make you... I'm trying to think of a good example. Anyway, when I was like working in a hospital and just felt like that wasn't my lane. And it's easy to take that on as just who you are, where you're like, dang, I suck. Or like, I'm like really not doing what I love, or da-da-da. And then you kind of take that on as an identity. And I remember God saying to me one season, in the last 5 years probably, he was like, Lindie, how do you define success? And
it's such a good question.
And he kept harping on me this one particular year. How do you define success? And I was in a place where I think I was jobless at the time. And it was around COVID, and all the things was crazy. Like, you couldn't get a job anywhere. No one had $1 in their bank account, but it was, and because I was feeling insecure that I'm in my 30s, I'm jobless, I'm single. It's like all the things you just really are like, I don't even love to say out loud. And I was taking that on as, and almost immensely, it sounds weird, but like lowering myself in standard because my realities were just crap. And God kept poking at me. He said, how do you define success? And finally I was like, I don't know. And he said, it's not about what you're doing, it's about who you are. And I think what that practically strips down to is like, people need to strip a lot away. And that comes from, you could be in a season where you're thriving and you are in your dream everything, and you are in your purpose of God, which isn't that the goal. But actually, if you find identity in that, it's still off. So I think people need to, it starts with almost like a release of all the external that you find identity in, and a stripping back and a coming back to God with a bit of a clean slate and being like, who do you say I am? Start there. That's a great place to start. And I have been there. I've done this and taken a season of this. And sometimes you go back to that because you need reminded when things happen. And I remember having a mentor. Oh my God, I forgot about this. This is great. She was like, I want you to draw a picture of yourself. And I want you to write down the attributes that you like about yourself. And I remember feeling like, for the context for the listeners, I'm a horrible artist in that way. So it was just
the
like
most beautiful stick figure you've
ragged
ever seen.
little something caricature, and it looked exactly like how I drew them when I was 3, because I've never.
That's called art. We're gonna take that to MoMA.
Hey, way to be in trend right now. so
And now all
more.
the Gen Zs,
This
I'm an
is
influencer.
just modern art.
Modern
okay?
art.
That's it. It's that
Shout out to
simple.
Picasso.
I'm gonna go sell it to a French museum. Anyways,
Yeah.
it
I
clearly
mean,
was
it's
horrible.
probably beautiful. It's fine.
No, it really wasn't. I don't feel the need to sugarcoat. But anyways,
Let's switch the topic. Let's
find
dive
the
in.
journal.
Yeah.
I'll dig back into my little tub of journals.
Do you have an art bro? You know?
I'm not an artist in that way. But anyways, so she was like, Lindie, I want you to draw a picture of yourself. I want you to write down all the physical attributes you like about yourself. I want you to list like the personality attributes you like about yourself. And it was such a funny exercise. And there was more to it. I kind of forget. But I remember at the time, I was probably in my late 20s when I did this and was kind of digging into some counseling. And it was very uncomfortable, which is so funny to say. And I was like, I remember just sitting there wherever I was. I'm like, I like my eyes. You know?
I was literally sitting here thinking, like, what would I write? And I was like, well, I guess my eyes are okay.
Yeah. And then of course, let me say that same statement fleshed out a bit more years. I'm like, I love my eyes. Actually, this is going to even be weird to say. People give me compliments a lot. They're like, I see Jesus in your eyes. I love your eyes. You have kind eyes.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm like, oh, thank you. And I know that actually. Like in my soul, I'm more settled in that. Where
That's
I'm like,
beautiful.
it's not about the eyes, but I'm getting to a point. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not looking for the affirmation from people around me to tell me who I am.
Yeah.
I already come into that conversation, and it's a silly example, but knowing, I'm like, thank you. I know that about myself. So I do think
That's so good.
you have to go on an unwinding to then have God build your house and for your house to become secure in who he says you are. And then you can like externally grow, if that makes sense.
Dude, that's so beautiful.
So great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you have something to say?
Well, you go ahead. That's all
I
right.
had a question.
Pass that furry mic.
I had a question. This is Samuel. Okay, Samuel, say hi. It's like weird.
Such a weird mic.
You know,
Way
you know it's great. You know, it's like I don't have to take him outside for a walk. He's just
Okay.
free.
He does need a
He's
leash.
always there.
What's your
You know,
question?
my question.
It's like my slipper.
You have a way of making people feel so safe and seen. I can probably count on one hand, like throughout my life, how rare that is. I've met maybe under 5 people who have this way of just making you feel like you are the tallest priority in the moment. And I don't know, like in identity, was that something that was always a part of your nature, or was that something you started receiving over years and you're like, you know what, I want to be known for that. I want to.
That's a good question.
Not that it has to be totally thought out, you know, but where do you think that comes from? And do you see yourself that way?
Well,
Because we really appreciate.
I'm gonna hop in
Yeah,
on this
we-
one just as a friend because I've known you for so many years, and I knew you. Gosh, how long has it been now? Like since Kara's 24? Gosh, almost 10 years now.
Yeah, over a decade for sure.
Which is super wild, and I'm like, regardless of what you were navigating and what you were processing as a friend, I always felt like that. I have always in my relationship with you felt like I was seen, like I had a space to process without judgment, but just a space of love and understanding. And you know, because you've been with me so much, that I have consistently wrestled with identity, not in who God sees me to be, but in the way I find my value quite often from work, and God has had to strip that from me and rebuild me, and then I kind of can fall back in that space a little bit. And I know that I could come to that space with you, and you were able to just speak. You've always been able to speak life over me and see things in me that I didn't even see in myself yet. Like you were naming spiritual giftings that I found out years later I had, but that in it I couldn't even receive when you were saying it, because I'm like, me? What? And so
I'm prophetic.
what is this gifting? And so I just want to say from a friend standpoint on our relationship, I'm like, gosh, as long as I have known you, that has been just such a beautiful gift that you have. And I'm thankful for that. So like as your friend, thank you for that.
Thanks, guys. This is lovely. These are good questions. That's a good question. You know what? The first thing that came to mind, and shout out, Mom, if you're listening. Actually, my
Hello.
mom from a young age, and I'm really grateful for her. It pissed me off at the time, but she always said, Lindie, you need to put yourself in other people's shoes and try to seek understanding for how they feel. of course, she would say that from the context of elementary school girls who were mean to each other on the playground. You know what I mean? Like, it was kid version. And at the time, and it's probably great, again, since I'm so wired for justice and almost like, want something to be right. It's like it started building a muscle in me, a spiritual muscle, a very long time ago, of like trying to expand my understanding of situations, which is and people. And so I think that has helped me go on a journey in life. And now I have a very innate value system to understand people. I think there is some natural wiring in that for sure I just find people fascinating, and I love understanding someone's story. I love understanding, this is so nerdy, I'm like, I love knowing why you're wired the way you are. Where does that come from? You know,
I love that.
How does that tie into whatever? I feel like I love going on that journey with people, just in conversation of, it's fascinating because we're all super complex, and half the time we're so unaware of why we're triggered by something, you know. And so I think it's been this snowball through the years, Grant, to your question of, I think my mom kicked it off early with trying to live that way. I think it combines as well with my belief of the Lord and his isn't the goal. We're all trying to become more like him, right? I hope it is, you know. And so, gosh, his nature is so offensive, where it's so loving and it's so, you know, it's so intentional and it's so consistent. And then I think you combine that with, I've had people do that for me in my life, you know, when I've been in really hard seasons, and I know the value of that. So I'm grateful for certain people through the stages of my journey, you know, that poured into me, and I know the value of it. But I think it genuinely boils down to, I just innately feel the importance of that, and believe that people are important, and your story is important, and what's going on is important. And I feel very connected to understanding that. And I don't know, I just have such a value system for that, for everything you've said. And so I appreciate you saying that. That's how you experience me, but I'm like, it's important. Gosh, how many people don't do that in life?
Yeah, it's so real. Yeah.
You know, I would say where I've probably grown in that is maybe when I was younger, I felt more to the conversation of identity. I probably did get some identity of that in my 20s, where you're like, I'm the good friend, you know? And like, I still think it's a true statement that I'm a good friend, but gosh, then you count some losses in there and some like really hard situations where you lose some friends, and you're like, where does this like actually sit for me? Like, it's so to the stripping away. I'm like, to be honest, I've had some strip away, and I've had to come back to a grounded place of, no, I actually genuinely know God has wired me like this, and I'm grateful, but I don't actually get identity in it at this point. I get no glee from being a good friend. You know what I mean? Sure. You know, some people are like, I'm going to love you because really it's more about me. Like, if we're loving people for that, for ourselves, then something's off, you know? And
dude.
Yeah.
That's so good. Ooh, I feel like we're going to end on a banger. We're ending on a banger. Ending on a banger. We love this. This was so special. So special. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being here with us. But I want to do a quick shout out right before we go to our good friend Dan. He's amazing. He is the man behind the camera, doing all the things for us this season.
Holding that camera.
And Dan has been someone who has just poured into our life in such a beautiful way since we moved to Paris. And we're honored. We're honored to have him as a friend, and we're so honored that he was willing to step in and help us out so that we could bring, you know, story and life to you guys, and it couldn't happen without him. So thank you, Dan.
Amen. Love it.
Insert crowd cheering.
Hey.
Okay, we're out, guys.
Yeah.
We're out, but before we go, where can people find you online if they want to connect or
yes, since I'm such an influencer.
You are a Parisian influencer.
I'm a Parisian influencer that no one is aware of, including myself. Sure, the social channel I have is at Lindie, LINDIE.Beth, BETH. I am single, so I'm open to dates.
Oh.
Hey, I put that in there. I will leave out my phone number, but you can find me on Instagram and DM me. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And was there any other information you were looking for?
And then
now. We already exited.
I refuse to be
I'm
done.
flying back to LA October 2nd. Come find me in the Palisades Park.
It's like we have to drag her off.
With a coffee and hopefully a dog on my hand.
Ooh, yes, the dog. We ended this podcast.
It's not been over. Great, you were out when we talked about the nails, and then he entered back in.
You know, I'm back, okay? I'm back.
I'm also getting a tattoo in a few days.
Okay.
So you're going to be unrecognizable, okay, by then.
No one's
Dan, I'm
gonna
gonna
know.
need you to call cut.
Yeah.
He stopped filming ages ago.
Memory card got full.
Oh, did we miss that whole last
That's all
bit?
right.
I
Well,
think this is over.
Thank you for tuning in to Please Forward This.
Oh, it's still
Thanks.
going.
And we'll see you guys next week for episode number
3.
3.
Trace.
All right. Crush
Un,
it
deux,
today.
trois. Isn't that French?
Un, deux, trois.
Un, deux, trois. Au
Au revoir.
revoir.